Knowledge media.
Knowledge as process.
Knowledge is something human beings naturally crave.
Do you know what it means to know something?
The Knowledge Media Podcast with Heather Prozac.
Joining me today is Dr. Julie Ponesse. Can we talk a little bit about what it means to be a professor of ethics?
Well, ethics is really a discipline of philosophy where we try to ask questions that have to do with morality. And that has to do with what is good and bad, what are the best courses of action that human beings are capable of, what does it mean to be happy, what does it mean to live a good life. And the thing that really marks ethics and makes it a distinct discipline from so many others is that we're asking what we call normative questions. So questions that often have a should or an ought in it, right? So should I lie to this person? Or ought I be courageous or more courageous than I'm being? So in ethics, it's not so much, I think sometimes people have the impression that you're going to go into an ethics class and get a secret code book, like a list of the do's and the don'ts or something. And some ethical theories are a little more like that than others. But my approach anyway is really just to try to figure out what are the big ethical questions? What are some approaches to asking them? What does it look like? What does success look like? If you look, and a lot of what I do is historical. So we look back to the past and figure out, well, when have human beings gotten things more right than other times? When does it seem as though we've been more tolerant, more respectful, more happy, more flourishing? And when have we gotten away from that and why? And how can we try not to do that again?
I always find it's the people that have the background in history, that understand history, that have learned about history. I love to latch onto those people because they say history repeats itself if you don't know history. And are you finding bits of that in what we're going through now?
Absolutely. I think about this a lot. I mean, my PhD is also in ancient philosophy, so I'm very interested in history, and I studied Plato and Aristotle, very early philosophers. And I think the reason why people say history repeats itself, and the reason I think there's a very good reason to think that's true, is because human nature is one thing. It's the same. I mean, our the challenges we face, our skill set, innovation, all those particular things change, so science looks different now than it did 1,000 years ago. Our governments look different. There would be a different number of people on the planet. We face different diseases or different ways of treating them. But all of those things to me are peripheral to what it is to be a human and what we're vulnerable to and what our weaknesses are. And I think so that's why we keep repeating these same cycles over and over again, because we seek comfort in numbers. We don't want to be ostracized from the group, and we will do an awful lot to ensure that that doesn't happen. So critical thinking is a challenge right from the get-go for human beings, because it involves a kind of, a willingness to step outside of the comfort of the group and reflect from the outside looking in. And, one thing that we are, I think, as a human species too inclined to do is to pick out the one or the few who are different from us, set them apart from ourselves and make sure we're not associated with them. And then if they start threatening us, we will do whatever we need to do in order to protect ourselves. We've seen this racially in the past with the Crusades. We've seen this religiously. Nobody likes to talk about it, but we saw this, within the last 100 years in Europe in the 30s and 40s. Humans are, I think we're seeing now what happens when fear takes hold of us, and it's a bit like a rabid animal that gets pushed into a corner. And most of us are saying, don't you dare put a spotlight on me. Don't you dare separate me from the group. I need comfort in my tribe. And I don't really care if what the tribe is saying or doing is right. That's not what's ultimately important. Come hell or high water, I will hold on to those bonds with my fellow creature, because that's what I know will keep me safe.
So
That's my thinking anyway.
it makes sense to me. No, it completely does. And so if you were a professor of ethics, but when you were working, those are academics. So in my mind, those are people that like to challenge each other, question. Did you find okay, let's get into that. So, because in my mind,
that's what we're known for, I guess, but
to question each other. Okay, so false advertising. So when you lost your job, did did you have this group of academics coming around you going, Julie, I can't believe it. I disagree with it, but here's why. Or did they challenge you? Or did you get to challenge them? Was there any conversation leading up to this?
Maybe the best way to put it would be to say that the silence was deafening.
Ooh, and the way you said that is quite deafening.
And I don't think my experience was unique. You are quite right that academics have, I think, a history, and they're also known for debate and challenging each other's ideas. That's the way it was when I was an undergraduate in the mid 90s. That's what I remember. That's what inspired me to go into academia. But something happened over the last 20 years, and it doesn't look like that anymore. And I think people who are, I actually ran into a couple of students in the grocery store yesterday, and they were telling me, I was asking them, what's it like in classes these days? And they basically echoed, this phenomenon. It's don't you dare question. It's not a matter of not questioning the professor. It's a matter of not questioning the prevailing idea, the accepted narrative, the accepted ethos, whatever that is in your respective discipline, right? And so the last several years, 5 or 6 or 7 years of teaching philosophy ethics, which should, if you can't get yourself riled up about those issues, because we talk about things like euthanasia and abortion and lying and murder and, these things. If you can't get yourself fired up about those things, if you can't figure out what your intuitions are, your opinions are, and then, if you're a philosophy student in particular and you're not interested in going to bat for those ideas and trying to figure out if they hold water or if you need to amend them, if you're not interested in debate over the big questions in life, then I don't really know what you're doing. But it's not just students that are experiencing that phenomenon, professors too. The last few conferences I went to were just sort of academics looking down at their phones, waiting for the speaker to finish. And then their version of asking a question was, well, this is what my research looks like, the end.
Wow. That's
So
a little bit like media
media or government.
or government. Right. Fair, fair. So do you find, was that something that changed over time?
Yeah,
Or
it
it
seemed to. It seemed to. I think I didn't quite realize. That I was aware of, the fact that we had this shift from an open, rigorous defense of one's beliefs. And never mind the fact that young people, right, the older teenagers, people in their young 20s, historically have been thought of as rebels, if nothing else. Right? Don't tell me what to think. I have my own ideas. This is what and now they're just kind of, either they don't have their own opinions or the opinions they have are just taken on from the group, or they have opinions that they're just afraid to voice. I hear a lot of young people say things like, um, I don't know what I'm supposed to say anymore. I don't know what I'm supposed to think. It seems like there are so many rules and restrictions and expectations that are so confusing. Am I supposed to talk about racism or not racism? Am I allowed to use gender pronouns? Am I not allowed? They just don't know what to think anymore. So yes, I think there's been a transition in academia and also in government and society and media, and those things I'm sure are connected to one another. This COVID situation has punctuated and I think opened, kind of peeled back the curtain and shown us what's really been going on for probably many years and maybe decades. Um, I know some other public intellectuals have views about how a lot of this wokeism, for example, started with in the Soviet Union. And I'm not a historian in that way, so I can't really comment on it. But I think these are important questions and they deserve examination. And we need to understand how we got to this place if we're ever going to have a chance of reversing it. And when I say that, it sounds like I'm saying, well, there's a problem with the human race,
right.
right? That we're in a bad place. And I think we are in a bad place, if for no other reason than because we have things like, unprecedented levels of alcoholism and addiction and obesity and other health problems. We have, a children's mental health crisis in Canada, in the UK, and in the States. And then just more anecdotally, people are not happy. They're uncertain. They don't know what the
Mhm.
future will bring. They feel destabilized by rapid rates of inflation with no apparent um, transparent discussion about it, where it came from, or how we're going to solve it, how they're going to put food on the table in the future. I don't think we're doing very well.
I think it just accelerated everything that was on the cusp. And then we had the last 2 years. It shone a light on a lot of different areas. And here we are. Let's just say we were all in your class. So we are in Dr. Julie Ponesse's classes, and you have someone who has taken the shot, someone who hasn't, and there's this bizarre thing of what we're seeing in the world, which is a lot of judgment, ridicule, staying away, families being broken down. Dr. Julie Ponesse, we are in your class. What do you say to that?
It's really interesting. I think in ethics, I mean, of course, we talk about moral principles, like
Right.
what you should do ideally, and but we don't talk about this kind of thing very much in undergraduate classes. But one thing I have done research on are the emotions that influence our capacity to do the right thing and our capacity to be good people. And so I think it's not well known, but it's very true that things like endurance and resilience are important for morality. And I think people are really exhausted right now. So if we had a discussion like that in class today, after 2+ years of being through all of this, I don't think that conversation would go very well. I think probably, one person would say, well, you're selfish for not being vaccinated. And the other person would say, don't trample on my rights, or, something like that. And the conversation might not proceed very robustly. And I think that's largely because we're exhausted, we're worn down. Thinking beyond those claims requires creativity and curiosity and endurance and independence of thought. And all of those things just require mental energy. We don't have those things. Also, there's a lot of very interesting research over the last several years in philosophy and psychology and in neuropsychology. So, looking at the brain through MRI and fMRI imaging to try to understand what parts of the brain light up when we're sort of faced with a moral challenge, or we're trying to reason through a moral decision, or things like that. And one thing all of that research shows is that fear has enormous impacts on our ability to make good moral decisions and be good people. And I think we've gone through a couple of years of tremendous fear. And I think I would try to talk about these things in class, because talking about them doesn't mean we know what to do about it. It doesn't mean, like, as soon as we're going to start talking about the fact that fear influences our decisions, it doesn't mean we immediately have a treatment plan, to figure out how to get out of that.
Yeah.
But I think very often just identifying what's going on, like, why are we at such loggerheads over this? Why can't we trust, why can't we move forward? Why can't we move this conversation beyond its stagnancy? And I think one reason is that we're exhausted, we're terrified, that fear makes our thinking very myopic. So we're only able to, it's a little bit like, if you hold a paper towel roll up in front of your eye and you close the other eye and you look at the world like that, right? When we're in a state of fear, we're only able to see little bits of our environment. And when it comes to moral decision making, if you look at this COVID situation, all we hear on the media all the time are things like case numbers, ICU numbers, COVID deaths. But there are a lot of other things going on, a lot of other pieces of information. There are things like stratified risk. So the young people you're talking about who would be in my class, if they're otherwise healthy and they're in their late teens, early 20s, they're at very, very low risk from getting seriously ill from COVID or die. That's not a piece of information that we're uptaking successfully because it doesn't feed our fear, right? The fact that lockdowns and masking are causing other kinds of sociological and psychological problems that are harms, right? I can't remember his name, but there was just a young boy who committed suicide after being bullied about being, I think he was vaccinated, but the
He
rumor was
didn't
that,
know there was a rumor. Yes, that was a story.
right?
Yeah.
There are all kinds of harms that are happening, but we're just myopically, focused on certain kinds of information, and that information makes us very pessimistic. So it makes us feel like it's a kind of a doom and gloom phenomenon. We feel like nothing good can happen in the future, and we're obsessively focused on this. The other thing about fear is that it's addictive. right? I mean, I don't mean to be sort
Isn't
of.
it like misery loves company? Is that
Yeah,
the
a
quote?
little bit. We do kind of like to get into this zone and reside there. I think part of that is that it takes mental resources to climb out of it, but part of it is that there's an addictive quality that comes from the stress hormones that are produced when
Mm,
you're in a state of fear. I mean, we pay to go to scary movies, we pay to go on roller coasters. We do enjoy being, we jump off buildings that are probably not a great idea, but we do it anyway because we love that it creates a sense of fear, right? And part of that is that it generates a physiological response that,
right.
and some people are more, it varies from person to person, and some people are more prone to that kind of addiction than other people are, just like some people are more prone to caffeine addiction or sexual addiction or whatever it is, right? So I think that it's really important to open up this conversation beyond just what are the right reasons for getting vaccinated or not, to why do people hold the views they have in the first place? How can we better understand, the psychological forces like fear and exhaustion and a lack of resiliency that get us to this place and keep us there where we can't move beyond and have more productive conversations with people. I feel like I went on and on there, and maybe
No,
that
you
was
didn't.
more
And no, because I
than
think
you
it's
wanted.
really it's wonderful to hear from someone with your background because we can all have opinions and everyone has them. But sometimes, and it's been something that I've been thinking about is, where has this the locking of challenging each other. Even with me, when I put my video up from Ottawa, what was most amazing are the people that were able to rationalize what they saw
Mhm.
and go, okay, I may not agree with it, but I'm actually curious because you gave me another side I didn't
Yeah, and that's a
understand.
rare person, I think. I'm a bit.
Rare. Because I'm a big believer in looking forward and not looking back. How do we move forward?
Yeah, I mean, I have some advice, and I don't know if it's as, like, immediately fix the world positive
That's
as
too bad. I like immediacy, but fine, we'll
I
work on
know.
it.
Well, we'll see what we can do and turn it around, but
Can't do that? Are you sure?
I think one piece of advice I have is we have to really try to identify what can we control and what can't we control. We can influence certain things, but we can't absolutely control them. We can't control what the Globe and Mail is going to publish tomorrow. We can't control what's going to go on in the house today. We can't make our brother, sister, mother, spouse agree with us if they don't want to. We can try at these things, but ultimately can't control them. This is one of the great insights from the ancient philosophers. I think they were really focused on trying to understand what the good life consists in and making sure you're basing it on things that are within your power, right? The world is not a very nice place right now in many respects, but there are senses in which we can make a world for ourselves within it. A while ago, Jordan Peterson was talking about this kind of thing, and he said, you can. I'm not going to get this right, Jordan. If you're watching, I'm sorry if I get this wrong, but I think the essence of the idea was that we can choose. We can't choose the circumstances, but we can choose whether or not we are going to be made different by them in a bad way, in the sense that we allow ourselves to crumble under the weight of them. We can choose to endure them, right? And maybe grow stronger as a result of it. Or we can choose to use it as a source of strength and building our character, use it as an opportunity for reflection, use it as a chance to think through the quality of our relationships. I hear from people every day who tell me about how relationships have broken apart and they want to know how to fix it. And I mean, I'm not a therapist or a psychologist, but I guess the one piece of advice I do give them is I think the first step is thinking about whether or not they're in principle fixable. Because if you're talking about a relationship with someone that you cared about, but hasn't been willing to listen or have a conversation with you that's genuinely open for the last 2 years, there probably isn't any hope in that. And that sounds really pessimistic, but isn't there also a kind of freedom in it? Thinking I don't have to be weighed down or shackled by this doomed project anymore. And then maybe releasing myself from that allows me to focus on other relationships that maybe I didn't put much stock in before. And maybe I'm realizing that, wow, I've got a lot of support from someone I wouldn't necessarily have expected to get support from, and influencers and celebrity and experts. And it's easy to believe that the only kind of good life is a life where you're thought well of by other people.
And
And
we've gone through that for so many years, right? A lot
absolutely.
of us
And
have never been challenged in the way that we have been now.
yeah, absolutely. And I think it would take, longer to explain why, but I just want to say to people, I don't think that's true. I don't think that a good life, their happiness rests on what other people think of you.
I would
And
agree.
that's probably for another
That's a
conversation.
whole other podcast, which I hope you join me on. But we used to be at a place where we could have opinions and then still go out for dinner after, even if we disagreed on them.
Mhm.
And now we're in a place where we're cutting people out of our lives. And
And
I
we're
think
not
that's the most
just
fascinating.
condoned for doing that. We're applauded for doing that. Good for you. I mean, you see this on social media a lot,
Yeah.
right? You say, okay, that's it, done, canceled. You see influencers just when people criticize and they say, done, you're blocked, canceled, and then people will, applaud. Good for you. And I don't think that's a good trend for society to be, moving into. Um, this has kind of been a theme of our conversation, I think, but it's that this is not about whether you disagree with someone or not. It's about how you treat each other once you recognize that you have that
Right.
disagreement, right?
Wow. There's so many different channels we could go down, but you do have a book called My Choice. It's out now,
Mhm.
and of course, because of your experience, I understand why you wrote it. But is there anything else you wanted to share about the book?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I started writing the book, I thought it would really be like an extended argument against the mandates. And it turned out to be the case that that just became one chapter because I started thinking about how we got to this place. And so the last two chapters of the book actually are my favorite because they're both historical and forward looking. So one is, how did we get here? What's gone on in society over the last really number of decades that explains how we got to the place that we've been talking about today. And then the last chapter is what can we, what do we see looking forward to the future. So I would almost encourage people, if you get the book, to those are the chapters where I think the really unique things are happening. And I talk about the what we can learn from ancient civilizations and Walt Whitman and the importance of literature and art, and liberal arts generally in society, and writing and thinking and all the good stuff. So
All the good stuff, the stuff that we should learn about. You have been wonderful. Thank you for joining us on Knowledge Media, Dr. Julie Ponesse.
thank you so much. Have a good day.